I'll have a little look back, really. I was really interested that when we had a small conversation about this earlier, just to kind of tee it up, you said, I felt my whole career I still had a point to prove, like even towards the end. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it did. Going right back to when I was a sort of 14, 15-year-old, as soon as I walked onto a football pitch, people looked at my physique. I was probably 6'5" and 7 stone. I mean, it's not your average footballer. And as soon as I walked on, actually, I saw people laughing, for instance. And then it was only when I sort of proved to people that I could play straight away. Oh, he can play. And I felt like that sort of followed me round the whole way, really, until I finally sort of proved it at Liverpool and England that I was at home at that level. But it was a difficult path, and then obviously later on in my career, I had to prove it again, really, because everyone believed at 36, 37 that I was just a last-minute substitute, and I wanted to be more than that.
I think with Crouchy, I think what it was what annoys me is when people say he had a great touch for a big man. He had a great touch for any footballer, because if Crouchy would have been 6'2", 6'1", you'd have been talking about him like you'd have said, he's a really good technical player. So the label, what we labelled with him, was unfairly, because with the ball at his feet, he's as good as most players at holding the ball and bringing players in, turning around the corner. We're going to look at Harry Kane later at some of the things he does when he drops. Crouchy could do that. So, like you said, I can understand why he felt he needed to prove things, but what a career he had, you know?
Yeah, loved it. Feel obviously proud and privileged of being able to have the career that I had. There were times, I remember Aston Villa, I went there, I'd scored a lot of goal supports, I think 19 one season, went to Aston Villa for a lot of money back then, 5 million. And I was at Villa, and my first home game was against Newcastle, and Alan Shearer was up the other end of the pitch, and I'd scored that day, and he scored, and I looked at him from the opposite end and thought, I am a million miles away from that. I genuinely thought, if that's what the Premier League's about, I am so far away from this. And I think it was because, like, obviously Joe Coles, the Steven Gerrards, the Frank Lampards, the Michael Owens, Rooney's, their path was mapped for them. I sort of had to go round. I went non-league at Dulwich. I went on loan to Sweden, and I wasn't strong enough for the Premier League at 21. Thankfully, I went on loan to Norwich. I got my confidence back. I went back to Southampton and flew from there, really. And I think it was 23 when I was finally ready for the Premier League, and then thankfully it took off from there.
When did you think I think all footballers, we have a perception when we think our peak, when we look back when our peak years were. When do you think you was at your peak? Where do you think you bet your best time?
Those years at Southampton, I think it was 2004, 2005, got into Liverpool and England. I think 2006 I scored 10 goals in a year for England. I was top goal scorer in the Champions League when for Liverpool. I think I got 7 goals in the Champions League that year. Got to the final. We won the FA Cup. We were at the World Cup. I scored in the World Cup. You know, these are all highlights in that sort of 3-year period where I was playing the best football of my career.
But you still felt like you were having to prove yourself, even when you won the trophies and played the games, particularly for England. Yeah,
without doubt. With England, that 10 goals I scored in that year, I felt like I had to score in every game because I was always the plan B, and there was always someone to replace me because I was never fashionable. I was never... As soon as someone played me, it was like, oh, we're going to go long ball. But I think the players in the squad knew that we could play to my other strengths and my attributes of receiving the ball into feet. But the managers often got labelled as a long ball manager if they played me. And I think sometimes they shied away from playing me because they didn't want that tag. And I think with England especially, Sven, I don't think he worried too much what the press used to say anyway, so it certainly didn't faze him playing me. But since then, obviously Capello, but McLaren was good for me, and I scored a lot of goals. But I always felt that Rooney and Owen would play, which I totally accept. But other than that, I felt I was the best striker at that time to play if they weren't fit. And thankfully, I played enough games of 42 caps, but I think, maybe it could have been more.
It's an interesting emotion, this, because I think that, when you were in your prime, you were central to the plan. A manager would buy a player like Joe Cole, wouldn't he, and say, right, I'm going to build a team around Joe and his abilities. Yet you sort of talk like there were certain times in your career, like you felt like a plan B. You're like, that's what I want my team to be. That's how I want to play. That's how I want to win games. If it doesn't work out, I'll bring on Peter Crouch.
Always. I mean, towards the end, that was half the reason why I retired, really. I had other things going on, but I didn't want to be, talked about it before, head on the stick last 10 minutes, get wheeled out to sort of try and change a game from a losing position. And I felt like I was more than that. And I thought there was a little bit of stigma with age as well towards the end, and people get phased out when I still felt that I was fit enough to play. But listen, God, there's a few gripes, but the career I had was every day I enjoyed it. I'd smiled, and hopefully that came across, because we've got the best job in the world, and I've absolutely loved being a part of it.
I think it stood out for me when we went to Norwich, and Crouchy was only there for 3 months, and how much people highly thought every club he's been at.
Yeah.
You know, people. You know, he was such an important part of the team and the fabric of the team, because, like he said, I think that's a good thing for a player to constantly feel like they have to prove themselves. But certainly, like that spell with England, you know, when you were scoring at a rate, it must have been a goal a game. Like, he felt that he had to do that just to stay in the team. Do you know what I mean? And he was brilliant during that spell for England.
I felt that internationally and in the Champions League, I felt like I was going to score in every game. Yeah. I thought when I was playing for England, I had Joe Cole on the left, you know, Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, David Beckham whipping crosses in, Rooney just behind me. I just felt like I was going to score every game. And even in the Champions League with Liverpool, I felt the same thing. I felt the Premier League, for me, personally, was harder than the Champions League in international football.
No, I agree with that.
Genuinely, because the way I played, some of the international teams, like the Milans, the Inters, the ACs, you know, all the teams that were in the Champions League at the group stages with Tottenham and also for Liverpool, I just felt they hadn't come up against a player like me. And when I did play, they didn't know how to handle me. And I felt that, in all honesty, I had more joy internationally in the Champions League than I would have done in the Premier League.
I think that's that. I speak to a lot of ex-players about that, and it's always the technical ones. I think really believe that, because especially 10, 15 years ago, the Premier League was a lot more up and down and required a lot more power, and there was a lot. The tackles were flying in. Crouchy was a technical player. Yeah. Crouchy, when I had the ball and I used to come inside and with England and turn it around the corner, he was the one I wanted on the end of it, because I know that it's safe, and he'd be bringing players in. Very underestimated in the link-up play and the build-up play. Yeah, he got the goal-scoring record, speaks for itself, but the build-up play was top drawer as well.
And you know what? I think the most important thing is enjoying it. And I saw, particularly towards the end of your career, I know, and you've already said it wasn't the easiest time, when you came on the pitch, when you scored a goal particularly, it was clear you were a man who was aware that this wasn't going to last forever.
That was towards the end, when I got like a few goals that was coming off the bench. Yeah, you realise that it's getting taken away from you. I don't want to stop playing football, neither did you.
No.
You know, it's getting taken away from you. So when you enjoy those moments, when you do score, I think I probably over-celebrated them a touch, because you know, someone's going to take that away from you one day, and there's no better feeling on this planet than scoring a goal.
Wonderful. Loads of nice comments coming in for you. Kicking Beat says, legendary player. Liverpool fans love you, Pete. Charlie says, Crouchy turning up again with the best anecdotes in football. Billy, thanks for the goal against City, Crouchy. And Rory, underrated. Gave us all for every club. People can laugh at his height if they like, but he backed it up on the pitch everywhere he went, and he scored some screamers.
It's quite emotional.
Don't cry. Don't cry yet. Save